One of the main reasons why I started this podcast is because I believe we all have a story within us that the world could benefit from hearing. And I think you are exhibit 1A of that. So I really appreciate you for taking the time today to speak with me.
I appreciate that sentiment. Thank you.
So, most kids, their senior year of college, want to make the most of their final year and have as much fun as possible with all their friends, and understandably so. It's their last year before entering the real world. You, on the other hand, had a little bit of a different year, and you walked onto the basketball team your senior year at Iona. Where did that passion and drive to achieve a goal like that come from in that final year of college?
It was just a dream of mine from a kid, playing high school and even grammar school CYO basketball. AAU wasn't as big back then. There was one or two select teams that kids, the best kids in the city, had to get invited to play at. Now there's AAU programs everywhere, but it was just a dream, a lifelong dream to be play college basketball. I did. I tried out 3 years straight. So my last year, I almost gave up. I got a little nudge from my college roommate, and he was like, give it a shot. You did it 3 years in a row. Might as well do it one more time. And luck had it. He was looking for a guy to sit on the bench and work hard during practice. You know, very he was very open to the fact that I would not play. Um, but in my back of my head, I guess I thought it'd be more than a 2020 man. 2020 man. If you're up 20 or down 20, there's a chance I was getting in, but that's what I was.
So after you graduated from college, did you go to work on Wall Street right away?
So yeah, so I mean, my Wall Street experience was working down by Wall Street. I was an accountant, on a path to be a CPA. I worked at one of the big eight. That back then it was big eight. Now I think it's four, but it was the big eight accounting firms. It was Deloitte, Haskins, and Sells. And I think like right after college, I knew that the grind to become a CPA, the studying and the commitment to that wasn't in my DNA. So I rode the punches along with that for a while. Just did like a year and a half to 2 year experience working in the World Trade Center. Was actually in Tower One. That's where the office was. Top 10 floors. They had 94 to 104, and it was a great experience. I met lifelong friends that started with me. That class of '89 was 126 different college graduates from all over the country, and it was a great experience. I just knew that that wasn't my end game.
So what was the transition like from that into becoming a firefighter?
It was terrible because, I mean, look, my dad. Thank God, my dad had a good head on his shoulders for guiding the nine of us in the right direction. But back in high school, I always said to him that I was going to work on Wall Street. I was going to, be this whatever big shot. And he said, "Okay, that's fine. Good luck." But he said you should have a backup plan. So my brother, just a year younger than me, he wanted to be a firefighter. And my dad was like, "Look, why don't you take some of the tests with your brother, and this way you have a plan. You never know what happens in life." So I said, okay. So I took the fire. So I trained with my brother, and from physical training to studying, and we both did really well on the test. I may have beat him by like a hundredth of a point, but the way it goes into some kind of a lottery. But we were 600 names apart. I think I was 1,800 on a list of 10,000, and he was 2,200 of a list of 2,000. So I wound up getting called in the summer of '93 to go into the fire academy. But from '91 to '93, oh, I had thousands of jobs. I was just doing everything, trying to find my way. And the one thing that came constant in my life was like, all right, even though I was looking for sales jobs or looking for another job down on Wall Street, I needed money. So I was always doing two things at once. So every Friday or Thursday night, I was bartending somewhere in the city. And then I realized, I said, well, I really like this. I like doing this. So before I became a firefighter, I opened my first business.
And that was the bar?
Yeah, but Third and Long it was called. Yeah, 35th and
How,
Third in Manhattan's Murray Hill section, which is pretty popular, pretty dense bar and restaurant area now. Back then it wasn't, and we had a nice 26-year run.
wow, what was the process like at the start getting that off the ground?
I was 25 and my brother was 24. We did it together. It was a challenge because the biggest thing was getting the capital to do the renovations, and lucky enough to introduce to the right person, and he kind of spotted us the way, and then gave us a little book on how we have to pay him back. And we were really focused on doing that. So within the first year or two, we completely paid off the construction loan that he gave us, and then it was a matter of everything I've done past my life, networking. So I not only did I play basketball at Iona, but I played rugby at Iona. So I had different circles of friends from Iona, and my brother had different circles of friends from where he went to school, and we were able to put the best of the best together, and we wound up with a really good establishment with great employees. I don't think we fired one person, and some of them worked with us for 10, 15 years.
Wow. So you just talked about how you used to work in Tower One when you were working for the accounting firm. Talk to me being on the other side of that as a firefighter when 9/11 happened.
Oh, well, I mean, obviously, it was years since I've been in the building itself, but I knew where they were. My firehouse was up in Spanish Harlem, which was closer to the tip of Manhattan, northern tip of Manhattan, and I didn't work downtown as much. Sometimes you get detailed down there, and then you get to see different types of buildings. But where I worked was more of some old tenement buildings, 4, 6 stories, and then some city project high rises. Very few office buildings. So I was working that morning, and we were sent down there, and it was a hellish day and time in many firefighters' lives, especially mine.
What was the recovery process like that, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally for you and for all New York City firefighters?
Um, sadly, here we are in 2024, and there are plenty that have not recovered. So speaking for myself, um, I think the the emotional burden that came after September 11th, it really didn't become a realism for a couple of months. We were busy. We were still working. Some were still working down at Ground Zero. Some had to man the firehouse. And in on your days off, you were going to funerals for months and months and months. We were doing that. For a lot of guys, there was no time to grieve and no time to figure things out. Now, for myself, yeah, it was a tremendous challenge, and I found myself physically letting myself go. I was gaining some weight. I found myself burying or hiding from the depression of that day with drinking. I was still in the bar business. I was still a fireman. I could run both jobs, but I was definitely drinking way more than I should have, and that was, I guess, how I coped for a while. And it was a tough couple of years, and it still is. I mean, I remember so many guys that had lost their lives, so many friends that weren't firemen. I grew born and raised in New York. I knew a lot of people that suffered the ultimate sacrifice that day. And for me, it's a never ending battle for sure.
When you said you were drinking a lot, I mean, did it feel like you were very alone and it was challenging to find other people to talk to about it?
No, it was a way to not talk about it. So uh, went on with my life as I would. I went to work. I didn't shun any of my duties. Um, but was I 100%? Was I probably 100% um, at my job for that moment? No. There's the old saying, "The hair of the dog." If you have too much to drink on Thursday night and you feel like shit on Friday, you have another beer, you'll be okay. And that does have some truth to it. So I just kept rolling with the punches, and you had a couple of drinks in you, and things were a little more lighthearted, and you didn't get into those conversations. So it was a way to not talk about it.
I know you said that you let yourself physically go, but you obviously got back into
Mhm.
incredible shape. What did that process look like for you, just from a training perspective?
I'm always a guy who needs a goal or some kind of a challenge in front of me. And, I had a really good friend of mine. I don't think he did it for any reason other than he wanted to challenge himself, but he called me up and said, "Hey, I want to do this triathlon and, raise money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society." And I was like, "Sure, I'm in." We were both single guys living in the city. Um, but I didn't know how to swim laps. I didn't have a bike at that moment in my life, and I had some things we had to get done. But I wasn't afraid of the challenge, and I think at that point I started to realize to myself like, well, actually, it wasn't that point, but after I signed on, um, I went to the first group meeting, and there was hundreds of people that wanted to step up and do this triathlon. Some of them were brand new. Some of them have done them before. There's just some people out there that like to run races for charity. Gives them a goal, gives it a purpose, gives it a meaning. And I was like that. So I remember the first night running in Central Park. I think we just had a nice, easy 3 mile run after a talk from the coaches, and I was dying, like really dying. I was like, holy crap, I am out of shape. And my buddy looked at me. He started laughing. He was in a lot better shape than I was, and he's like, "You are." He goes, "Maybe this was a good thing," and I'm like, "Maybe it was." And I was like, "Oh man, this is not how I operated in life. If I tried out for the basketball team 3 years in a row. I stayed in shape. I practiced hoops. I said, I got to slow things down." So I kind of think that moment in life stopped me from overdoing the alcohol. I think if he didn't challenge me to do this event, I may have gone further the other way. But yeah, so at that point I said, okay, now I decided to dissect everything that was needed to do this, and it was only an Olympic distance triathlon. Should take the average person close to 3 hours. So I jumped right in. I was like, okay, first of all, I have to get better at swimming. That's going to come in time. I got my bike, and then I really started focusing on my running. And I think we started. In February, so it was the second month of the year, and the race was late April, early May. So we had 4 months to get ready for this short race, and I slowed down the drinking. I didn't stop because I was a very social guy, and I also owned, at this point I owned 3 bars. So I'm like, it was great. We used the bars to help raise money for the cause we were doing, and I little by little started seeing changes in my mood, in my attitude at work, in my performance at work, and the way my clothes fit. I just was starting to lose weight. So I got hooked. So I did my first triathlon in May of 2003, and before 2005, I had 30 to 40 races of different lengths under my belt, and I was in the best shape of my life. So it really sparked the competitive nature in me, and got me focused on how to task these things. And then I found balance, better balance. I was still having a good time in life, but I was no longer, a little chunky in the middle, and I was no longer kind of miserable. I think it did help me also settle down with, come to gripes with what happened on 9/11 and who we lost and who we miss, and different ways to honor them and remember them.
So fast forwarding to the end of 2005 now, and I'm sure most people only ask you about the main event in your life that took place in December. And obviously, I do want to talk about that. But first, take me back to November 6th, 2005, and the experience of running a 3:13 in the New York City Marathon.
I'm coming fresh off my first Ironman, so I was in top shape. But I think with anything you do in life, look, there are some very gifted people out there that can wing any event, or just jump into any sport and perform at a high level. But there's very few of those people. I was fortunate enough to. I am a firm believer of that. If you have a goal, whether it's physical, mental, financial, whatever, you need to surround yourself with people with the same goals, like-minded goals or like-minded passion. So uh, as a fireman now, I think I'm on like 12 years in the fire department. I've ran two marathons before with them, and I was like 4 hours and something minutes. It was nothing. It was just for fun and then to run with some girls that I knew. Um, but this was different. I mean, I'm coming off a couple of triathlons and my first Ironman ever in Lake Placid, and now I'm like, all right, now I want the juices are flowing. How can I make this competitive? I'm not winning the marathon, but there's a race within the race. So there's the cops versus the firefighters. Okay, they go for the mayor's cup, and it's top 10 guys, cumulative score, lowest time wins. And I said, okay, how do I become part of those guys? Well, okay, fire department's a small family, even though there's 10,000 of us. I look up who were the top 5 guys last year. Shot them an email, got on the phone with them. Where are you training? When are you training? What's the plan? I went in and they're like, oh, it was kind of like almost a tryout again because they were like, hey, take it, come on. This is our group. This is what we're going for. I'm like, well, I just finished an Ironman in Lake Placid. And they're like, oh, hold on a second. They're like, come for a run with us. And next thing you know, now I'm training with 8 to 10 firefighters, like 3 days a week. Everything else is on your own, but do it because next week's gets harder. And next week's gets harder. So there was one guy in the group. Actually, there was two that really took the lead. One was a more seasoned firefighter. This guy, Tom Grimshaw, had like 28 years on as a firefighter. And I think he's got like a crazy amount of marathons now. But back then, he had run 17 New York marathons. Some really fast as he got older, some fast for his age. He had the experience and he had the methodology and the technique and the approach we take for that race down. Then there was a younger guy who was a great athlete his whole high school and college career, and he had the plan. He put together. I wasn't either of those guys, but he came to the group and said, "Okay, guys, Tuesday it's short and fast. Thursday we're going longer and half marathon pace or 10K pace, marathon pace, and then the weekends we need to go long." And he had that all mapped out for us. When it was time to pick up, when it was slow. He brought in different programs all the time, and for a while, to be honest with you, I struggled. Like he even tells the story when we get together again. He's like, I remember we start our loop around Central Park. That's a 6 mile loop. We would do two of those and then go back to the academy. And he would be like, all right, listen, every 20 minutes we run a mile at marathon pace or something like that. I can't remember the plan, but he took off. And like I didn't see him the rest of the workout. And eventually we had a meeting spot where we all met up and they're like, dude, it's got to get better because we're here waiting. We need to be there. We need to be home. And eventually I got better. Eventually they're like, all right, we got to the spot and they turned around and they weren't waiting anymore. I was right behind them. So those top guys finished in sub 3 hours. I was the fourth guy, finished 3:13. So I still had some time to make up, but
Wow.
it was very organized. And again, I had 10 guys like minded, one goal in hand. And did we fall off on a Thursday or Friday? Sometimes, but you owed it to the team to get it back quick. So there was
Yeah,
no missing workouts and there was no slacking.
yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more that the people you surround yourself with, that becomes your normal environment. So if you're around very hardworking people, people who are training hard, that becomes the norm. Or if you're
Yep.
around people who are slacking, then guess what? Slacking becomes the norm.
Yep.
So November 6th, 2005, you run at 3:13. You're in incredible physical shape. You qualify for the Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
A month and a half later, December 22nd, 2005. Walk me through that day and how you remember it.
All right. So now again, I'm in the bar business still, right? So you have to remember, this is Christmas time. I have parties at the parties. Some I'm working, some I'm partying at, participating. But we were still on target, even though we just won the Mayor's Cup in November. The 10 of us, I think, I think five that really wanted to, all five of us qualified for Boston, and we were starting. Hey, take a couple weeks to relax. We're still going to run, but nothing structured. We're going out together, staying as a group. Whether you're 30 or 58, we're staying as a group, and we're going to kick it back up for Boston Marathon. So we all stayed in shape, whatever. So that morning, part of our cross training was, hey, we're going to meet an hour before work and then drive up to the state pool, and we're all going for an hour swim. And we had a deal that if you didn't show up, you had to have breakfast ready for the team when they got back. So my friend Shane, he loves to tell the story that you know I was headed up. I woke up. I was out late the night before, but I got up after a couple hours sleep, packed my bags, and there was a transit strike going on in New York City. So the subway systems and the buses were crippled. They were done. I had no way to get to work but ride my bike. Now, on a normal day, I have no problem riding my bike to work. It's only a 4 mile ride, whatever. But we're talking December 22nd. It was like 18 degrees with a wind chill of 8. It was just I was not a foul weather rider. I could have been a lot better at Ironman if I went out and rode my bike in the rain every day. I didn't mind running in the rain, but cold weather, rain, my bike was on the rack. But I had no choice. So I'm 5:30 in the morning. I get up, say goodbye to the doorman of my building, and I head up Third Avenue, and I get 2 blocks. So 8 minutes later, um, I'm run over by this bus, and the things are going on at the same time. So my team is waiting for me to go swimming. Half of them are saying, "Give him 5 more minutes," and the other half are saying, "No, let's go swim, and he'll cook us breakfast." So they're calling me, but nothing's happening. They're leaving voicemails, blah blah blah, calling me names, joking around. They go off for their swim, and when they get out of the pool, they get the phone call that I've been run over by a bus, and I'm in New York Presbyterian Hospital in critical condition. And I don't remember it, thank God, because I think the mind, that's one of the first tools of recovery. If I really did remember it, I'd have a harder time getting back on a bike. I'd have a harder time getting back out there in life. Um, but over years, either things came back to me or it was told to me. So now I have I've even watched a video of me getting hit by the bus. Um, so taken under the chassis of an empty 52 passenger charter bus, basically cut in half. Me and the bike became one, and just basically one of the crucial things that my one doctor said to me all the time was like, "Hey, look, sometimes when you're injured badly, it's better to lose part of your leg. With technology these days, we put a below the knee amputee is better than having a mangled leg." For me, my right leg was no longer functionally attached to my body. He's like, you could. We thought for a while you might lose the whole right leg just because of the way the damage was, and that would have been devastating because it's just now you're talking about from the hip down. Luckily, they were able to put me back together, and I have issues with it and limited strength and range of motion issues and nerve damage, but as far as everything goes, I'm working pretty good.
I know a main thing for you when it happened right away that you wanted the people that were helping you to know that you were a fireman. Talk to me about, how obviously anybody in that situation, they want to help, as much as possible. But talk to me about sort of the mindset of being a fireman and hey, like this is kind of one of our own that we need to help
Yeah.
that much more.
Yeah. Well, so look, yes, you're 100% correct. The fire department, the firemen and women in the city today and past, present, future will never ever give anyone for any reason different treatment. However, we have a unique camaraderie or obligation or commitment, however you want to word it, or your listeners want to absorb it, of taking care of our own. And it's just like the military, the Marines, the Navy, the Army. You know, the guys in the Army aren't going to not protect the guys in the Marines, but if one of theirs is in trouble, there's all hands on attack approach here, and they're going to take care of them just a better or with more concern. And so I do remember, kind of that's the last thing I remember actually in my accident. I'm laying underneath the bus. All the first responders are there. I'm screaming in pain, in and out of consciousness. And when they cut the bike helmet off and the Nomex hood I had on for the cold weather, and they cut that off my face, I heard one of the firefighters say, who he wound up knowing me, and he said, "Oh my God, it's Matt Long from 43 Truck." And ironically, even enough, like at the same time, one of the police officers that was there, he said, "What'd you say?" And he said, "He's a firefighter. We got to get it, we got to get going, we got to get going." And he said he's a firefighter. Now it's freezing out, and he was struggling to put on the blue glove because I was bleeding. My femoral artery was shut; it was severed, and I was bleeding so bad they couldn't stop the bleeding. So while they were working on me, stabilizing me and moving the bus and getting me ready to transport into the ambulance, this police officer reached into my groin and held my femoral artery with his bare hand just to slow the bleeding. And now that probably would not have been done because it's out of protocol. But he was willing to take that risk, and that's coming from the police department, the same team that I was trying to beat in the marathon. Um, but that's when I heard him say that is when I passed out. That's when I stopped, and because I felt the calm, I knew that I was in good hands. So that's exactly what happened that morning.
From a quantifiable factor, just to give listeners a better understanding of how serious this was, what were all of the injuries to your body that occurred?
All right, well, physical injuries, right? So I broke every bone. Every fracture was a compound fracture, which means the bones come out of the skin. Every bone in my left leg, my foot, my tib and fib, and my femur, complete crack, complete compound fracture, ruptured from the skin. On the right side, my they said my right leg was no longer functionally attached to my body. It was just soft tissue and muscle holding it on. My pelvis was shattered. It was destroyed. Also compound fracture. Um, the bike uh, basically cut me from my anus to my sternum and ripped my abdominal wall out. So a lot of muscle in my abdomen was just torn apart. Um, Severed uh, my sphincter, severed my um, intestines, basically, just destroyed my midsection. And I also had a compound fracture of the shoulder. So the hardest part of my accident, the physical stuff, obviously you could put bone back together, and they did. But the hardest part was stopping the bleeding. They couldn't find, there was so many arteries that were severed. They couldn't find the bleeding. And in the first 12 hours of the incident, I received 68 units of blood through transfusions that they wanted to stop because they felt like they were wasting blood. So, and we only have about 5 or 6 pints of blood in our body, no matter how big or small you are. So 68 in 10, 11 hours. Not good.
So your body obviously went through a lot of shock and stress throughout this
A little bit.
entire experience. But the thing that I found so interesting about your book is how it narrates how vital to your life your training and endurance athletics took on. And one quote that I found really interesting from your book is when Dr. Ichimpati says he understood the training involved, the endurance required, and the effort the race places on your heart. Talking about your marathon running, he said he suddenly had a better sense of who I was and why my heart had been able to last this long. How wild is it to think that endurance training quite literally saved your
It's
life?
not something that I thought I was doing. I thought I was training for Boston. So yeah, it's completely bizarre, but obviously looking back, I'm living proof of it. You don't have to go out and run marathons. You don't have to go out and do Ironmans, but it's crucial to take care of yourself so that you can withstand any level of insult or give yourself a chance with any battle. And it's proven that someone in better shape gets diagnosed with cancer, they have a better shot at beating it or fighting it and putting it off for a longer period of time because they have put themselves. So my doctor explained it to me as that I went through such a high level of insult. My body took all this insult, and he goes, because you were prepared, because your lungs were that in that good a shape, because your heart was in that good a shape. When you were laying on the table and we were just trying to find the bleeding to stop, your heart was going at 120. I mean, at 100, 28 beats per minute, and everyone else in the room is saying, he's going. And he said he's not because he knew what I've been through. He knew what I put my body through. And he goes, his heart and lungs are fine. Let's keep working. And they, thank God they did.
Another one of my favorite lines from your book: I survived because I had trained my heart to do the same. Becoming an Ironman had kept me from becoming a dead man.
Yeah, true. It's 100% true. I wasn't training for anything else. So we have a slogan in the fire academy, big posters all over the walls. And there's a sign that says train for life. And that's what I did, unknowingly, but that's what I did. And I just proved the fact that the better you keep yourself as a younger man or younger woman and throughout your mid years, when you are faced with the inevitable, whether it's your bus or some kind of bad diagnosis, you're going to have a better chance of fighting it. So I try to teach that to my kids. I try to teach that to anyone who I train. Just be ready because there's always going. Life's not fair. It's just not fair. Something's gonna happen.
I know the New York Fire Department is a massive community and it feels like a brotherhood. How integral was the NYFD at the onset of your accident and throughout your entire recovery process?
Uh, they are family, and so now I'm in the hands after the first responders take care of me on the street. Now I'm in the hands of the medical team at New York Presbyterian. You would think most jobs would be like, "Hey, keep us updated," but the fire department, from where the hospital was to where my firehouse was, there's probably 7 different firehouses, and then there's probably 3 or 4 more that go down further south. Well, all those firehouses, let's say 10, got together, and from day one took care of my family. I have my mom and dad were still with me, and 8 brothers and sisters, and then their spouses. They were in the hospital 24/7, keeping vigil because for the first 6 or 7 weeks I was in a coma. It was not known that I was going to make it. So the fire department cooked dinner, cooked lunch, drove them to and from. The guys volunteered on their day off, driving my mom and dad to and from the hospital. Nope, you don't, because you're not going to find parking. We'll get you in here quicker, stuff like that. So they did that for 5 months. That is unheard of. Outside of the military, fire department, police department, that is unheard of.
Right at the start, when this happened, how many surgeries did you undergo?
I don't know what we're up to right in the start, but in the 5 months that I was at the hospital, I left the hospital after 40 and having 43 different procedures.
43 over 5 months.
Over 5 months. Yeah, I'm probably up to 50 something now. I had my last surgery about 3 years ago that was related to the accident.
Will
So
you continue to need to have surgeries?
most likely, what I'm dealing with now is scar tissue. There was so much scar tissue growing in my intestines. I had too many blockages, and I got lucky enough where I went back to the same hospital because I was having one of these episodes, and the doctor who actually responded to um, to the accident years earlier, um, he had gone through my chart, and he came in to see me, and he said, "Because this is like the 15th time you're here." I go, "I know." He goes, "We got to go back in." So we scheduled it, and we went back in, and he was able to cut some scar tissue out. But the more you cut, the more it grows. So he was able to push some of it into the intestines, and that was about 3.5 years ago now. So he said, hopefully, I buy you another 10 or 15 years.
How big of a burden was the colostomy bag that you had, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally?
I always tell people, if I didn't have anything else going on physically, I don't think it would have been too much of a burden. But there was a lot going on. It wasn't the only thing. So it was a physical burden because it was hard to manage. I was still part time in a wheelchair. My abdominal wall was still open, so it was basically this huge, uh, thin piece of skin, a big hernia. Like if I stood up, I looked like I was 8 months pregnant. To have the colostomy bag on the side of that was even just another nail in the coffin, so to speak. And but emotionally, it drained me. I just kept thinking that I needed piece by piece to break down my recovery. And I said, I know if my intestines would just heal and they could put me back together, then I could work on the physical looking things. And I was 178 pounds, probably 10%, 8% body fat, and before the accident, now I'm 122 pounds, with no muscle at all. Um, so there was so much going on, but that was really what got me up here. And I had that for 2 years. It was 2 years before things started changing, and the doctor said we could attempt it.
You talked about in your book how there was a moment when it was late at night and it was just you and a nurse, and you said, I unburdened myself to the nurse on duty. The shock of my situation was finally sinking in. I told her I was feeling helpless and sad. It was the first time I had admitted those sentiments to anyone. And it's interesting to hear you talk about earlier how during 9/11 you were able to use drinking as a way to not talk and hide yourself from those sentiments. And obviously you were dealing with a lot of mental and emotional stuff back then, but you still had your health, so to speak, and you were still hadn't gone through this massive accident. And I'm curious to know, do you feel like this type of experience allowed you to, or it forced you to be more open with yourself emotionally and sort of like allow those tough thoughts to take over in a way?
I think what happened in that moment, I was getting some really really special care. I got extremely lucky. Everyone on my team uh, at the hospital was very good to me, and I think at that moment, um, because I think very short after that, she must have said something to someone else, and next thing you know, I'm talking to a psychiatrist, and I'm talking to social workers, and now we're talking out issues because I was in the hospital still. I was there for 5 months, so they weren't going to bring me in a case of Budweiser. Um, the fireman would have, but wasn't going to float. um, so yeah, so I think that I just felt comfortable enough with her in the moment, even more comfortable than I would have been with my brothers or sisters or my mom and dad. I had a lot of anger in those couple of months where I didn't want people coming to see me. I would turn away visitors, and I would even yell at my brothers and sisters. Um, but but yeah, there was just some kind of level of comfort that might have came upon me, and I opened up to her, and I think that was the start of it. In a small way, it was the start of it. I'm just a firm believer that I try to be as positive as possible in life, but your mind's going to control everything. You can go to the gym all day, you can swim in your pool, you can do it, but if your mind's not part of the equation and your thought process isn't part of the foundation of, you know, there's hope to get better just being positive that I will get better. If that's not working, then nothing's going to come after it. So I think that was the moment where I started to, all right, I threw a flag up. I'm not happy. I'm feeling down. I'm going, and people started talking to me. I started talking back, and the mindset started to change.
So your story in the accident when it happened got a lot of public attention and a lot of news coverage.
Yeah.
When did that wear off? And then it kind of just became like your new reality and you just trying to recover.
Oh, it's kind of funny because the what is it, 2000? It's almost 20 years, and someone wrote an article in the Newsday magazine on Long Island about a young firefighter who was a Marine, spent multiple tours overseas, and something happened to him as a younger firefighter, and they put him on light duty, and then the city fired him. I don't want to go into the details of it, but he wound up passing away of a heart attack. And the article was about how firefighters are a different breed and how they've been known, and this was just last week. Someone sent it to me, and how they have been known to show that they are a different breed and that they are capable of massive comebacks because of the passion for the job. And so they wrote about two people. One was Timmy Stackpole, who I knew as a fireman. Well, yeah, he was a lieutenant when I was a fireman, and I'm friendly with his family. And he was severely burned in a fire to the point where, I think day one in the burn center, they were telling his family, he's done. He'll never be a fireman again. You know, thank God he lived, but lo and behold, he did everything he could, um, and crawled his way back to become a firefighter again, lieutenant, and only, unfortunately, to pass away on September 11th. So they talked about him, and then the second example was me. So it's still in the press, which is bizarre, but I don't mind it. But on the second part of that question was, when did I start focusing? When I got out of the hospital, probably a year out now, I I still had the colostomy, and I'm starting to focus on how we're going to make this work, and the mindset was there. I incorporated my fireman friends that would help me training amped up, and I got myself to a place where the doctor said, "I think we could put you back together." So it was, I believe it was September or October, and I go through the surgery, and that was a hurdle in itself, just because now my plumbing's back together.
This is
But I
2006.
this is probably 2007 because I almost had the colostomy for 2 years.
Okay.
So this is the end of 2007. I get put back together, but now there's a now this is like, if it doesn't work, I'm back in there to get the colostomy back because you can't just walk around going to the bathroom all day. But I kept working hard. I kept training the rest of my body just like I did when I was marathon and the Ironman, and I kept getting stronger, and everything started to work well. And the doctor gave me the green light to, like, you know, you're good. So how do I take myself out of the city and the spotlight so that I can focus on getting better? Just like really getting better, losing the crutches, losing the walker, working on my gait and possibly running again. You know, how can I do this? So I couldn't do it in New York. I couldn't do it in the winter because I could hardly walk. I don't live in New York anymore because of this reason. That the winters, if there's snow or ice on the ground, I can't go out because my right leg will just fly out from under me. So I moved to Arizona. I found two guys that would help me in Arizona, and there was no fanfare. There was no nothing. I was just another guy to them that had an accident and needed rehabilitation. We became friendly, and I worked with them for 4 months, I think. 4 months of just treating myself like an athlete. 5 days a week. On my day off on Saturday, I swam in the pool and had some fun in Arizona. But we got after it, and by April, I ran my first mile.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that changing your environment in some regard can have a massive effect on the way you live and think and also on your identity. And I think the bigger environment change, the bigger those changes of who you are as a person can be. And one of my other favorite lines from your book is you say, I'm tired of people constantly asking how I'm doing. Everyone meant well. I appreciated their concern, but I was reminded that, well, I was that fireman run over by the bus and I just wanted to be Maddie Long. Going before you went to Arizona, there's another crucial part of your journey that I want to talk about, and it involves your mother. And you had told your mom you were out to lunch with your parents and you said, I'm miserable because I'm alive. If I had died, at least it would have been short term pain for you. But I got to live this, but I have to live this every day of my life. And your mom basically wasn't having it, and and she snaps back at you and says, do you want to be a miserable bastard all your life? How did this interaction and almost like the tough love that your mom gave you when she was talking to you, how did that almost get you back in touch with your old self prior to the accident?
She gave me some tough love for sure, and it didn't happen right away, but I realized that she was right, and I realized that I wasn't the only person in the world that was going through a hard time. That there are other people with challenges greater than mine. Um, that I should, it gave me appreciation for the fact that I was alive, and that it's all up to me now where I'm going to be. I said, at that point, I was still in a wheelchair. I said, no one's going to blame me if I'm in a wheelchair. My friends will come around, they'll push me out, take me out, they'll do it. I was run over by a bus. That'll be the story. But it was up to me to get out of that wheelchair. And I always equate that part of my journey to the human spirit inside, right? We all have it. Every one of us, every one of you listening, you have the human spirit burning inside you. It's a small little pilot light. You got to figure out what turns on your burners. So for me, like before my accident, it was I needed a goal, Ironman, marathon, play basketball. I had those goals, and that kept my burners on towards that success or goal. But at this point, my burners were off. The pilot light's still there; it's still burning, but the human spirit is still inside me. And my mom just whack. I mean, she really just gave it to me, the hard truth. And it was probably a week or two later that I realized that she was right. And I started saying, okay. And if I could push myself out of this wheelchair one time, can I do it five more? I would sit, push, five. Next thing you know, I'm up and about and I'm walking to the refrigerator instead of wheeling to the refrigerator. Everything came in progression because my mom got the burners going again. And my mind was set on getting better. And I got to the gym. I asked for a trainer to help me. I got to the therapy. I did what the therapist told me. I asked him to take me I did everything, acupuncture, e-stim, laser therapy. Anything that someone said might help me, I did. If it wasn't for that moment, I clearly tell everyone, if it wasn't for that moment and my mom reached over and gave me a hug, I'd still be in a wheelchair.
Wow, that's very powerful.
Yeah.
How did mental visualization, and I know you spoke about it in your book how you would do that for running as well. How did mental visualization act as a tool for you for thinking and seeing the future that you wanted for yourself?
One of the things I learned through with all my guys and teammates for the triathlon training was you need to even at every level, but especially at the Ironman level, right? One of the training days, they were like, "Hey, this weekend, go out and ride 100 miles by yourself." And I'm like, "Whoa, what's fun with that? I'm gonna be on a bike for like 7 hours by myself." And the coaches were like, "Yeah, because when you're racing, you're gonna be by yourself, and I want you to visualize." And he didn't want me to visualize winning the race or getting off the bike first in the Ironman. He wanted me to visualize, what are you going to do when you get a flat tire? What are you going to do when it starts to rain? What are you going to do when you reach back in your pocket because you had that extra nutrition there, and you reach back and it's gone because it fell out of your pocket? You need to visualize so you're prepared in the moment. And it was the same thing in a swim, goggles get kicked off, or on the run. What are you going to do? So in life, so I took all that to life, and now I'm trying to make this massive recovery or comeback. And what was my goal? Obviously, my goal was not going to be to run a 313 again, but I saw myself with less attachments. I saw myself with less equipment to help me walk. I saw myself rebuilding my body, and little by little that happened. It took 4 years, but it got me there. But the visualization is key for anything in life.
Yeah, you obviously were performing at a very high level before all of your injuries, like you said, 313 in New York City Marathon, running Ironmans. But you also talked about in your book how you were able to, thinking back to how much of a high performer you were, this almost held you back from seeing the progress that you were making post accident. You said you were kind of blind to it. How did you come around to finally being able to see or appreciate the progress you were making?
I think the fact that I left Arizona, I mean left New York for Arizona, and was out of people's daily lives, and for a while, especially my caregivers. And when I came back, and then I went to see them again, if it was a follow up, a doctor's appointment, or just a visit to the physical therapy floor, they will. I saw them notice the change, and then I saw it. You know what I mean? It came from external feedback before it came from me saying I'm where I want to be.
Were there any specific rehab exercises or therapies that were most impactful to your recovery?
I talk to people all the time, that I try to help people that have been in situations like this. I threw the kitchen sink at it. So it's hard for me to tell you that acupuncture worked, because at the same time I was doing e-stim, uh, it's laser therapy. So I did it all. I think it all worked. Um, I think, could I have gotten where I was without some of the things? Probably. Uh, but if you have the resources, you throw the kitchen sink at it. You do everything you can. Uh, if I was a healthy guy going to train for the marathon or an Ironman, I would say, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ride my bike 4 days a week and run one. Let's see how I do in the Ironman, and then I would be able to test it. But this was me trying to get my life back. So if someone said acupuncture might work, one of my doctors suggested it. Boom, I was in acupuncture 3 days a week. Someone said, "Oh, you should try this laser therapy treatment they're doing." Boom, I was doing that twice a week. So I threw it all at it, and thank God it all worked. But if I had to, if someone said to me, "Well, I can't do that," well then okay. If your doctor prescribes therapy 3 days a week, get in the gym 3 days a week. Mimic those movements until you're ready to lift weights. When you can lift weights, lift the weights. Don't shy from it. Just keep at it. Keep at it, because it will come. And that's eventually what happened.
So in Arizona, that's the first time you ran a mile and you did it
Yeah.
in 17 plus minutes. And it's in that moment that you make it publicly clear to people, I want to run a marathon again.
Yeah. I'm going back.
So in 2008, you run the New York City Marathon, and you've talked about how you weren't just running the race for yourself, but for other people as well. How did this race build the foundation and the starting point for you transitioning from the one who was being hopeless in this terrible situation to now being this beacon for hope?
Well, I mean, I ran the race for a number of things. One, I wanted to get my life back, and stop running on my terms. And two, I wanted to do it to let all the people, the firemen, the police officer that held my leg, the therapists, the doctors, the nurses, the PAs, even the damn transport guy in the hospital that just got me from room to room. I wanted them all to know that their efforts, that their hard work didn't go unrewarded or unnoticed. And I wanted to make that comeback so that, like my doctors, my main doctors, like sacrificed tremendously. I was being operated on Christmas morning, Christmas night, and they came back and back and back. Their own family time was compromised. And I wanted to let them know that it wasn't for no reason. So when I was able to do it, it felt great. And then post accident or post comeback marathon, getting an email from someone who says my brother or my sister or my mom is struggling. This is what happened to them. And we saw your story in the paper. Thank you. Like, I can't tell you, I still get them today. Still get them today. And you know what? It's not easy because there's some people that write me that I can't fathom helping them. They're worse than I was. But if I'm a beacon for hope for them, then great. Then that's my job. That's my purpose in life.
How did the message that your brother Robert sent you impact you before that race?
I didn't really know his struggles until then. And again, like I said, that race wasn't just for me or my. It was for my family to do to let them know that their support isn't going unnoticed, and it helped me tremendously. It got me through. I was out there for 7.5 hours. Anyone can run a 3-hour marathon. It's hard to run slow, and that definitely carried me through and kept me from quitting for sure.
So, to give you a little bit of background on me, I suffered a bad back injury, nothing even close to compare to you. I mean, what I went through was a paper cut compared to what you went through. And I couldn't work out for 150 days straight. But the night I went to bed on that 150th day, I knew I was waking up the next morning to go to the gym and work out for the first time in a very long time. So I'm curious to know, what was the experience like for you waking up that morning in 2008 knowing that you were going to run a marathon that day?
Nervous energy for sure, because I knew I was going to start. I just didn't know if I was going to finish. I didn't know. I didn't think that I would mentally quit, but physically, I didn't know if the body could take me that 26.2 miles. But I was determined to keep moving forward. I don't think I really slept at all the night before, but I did everything I did as I was a healthy athlete before my accident. I ate the meals that I ate. I had a nice glass of wine and tried to get some sleep, but the energy was too intense. I said there was time to sleep when I'm done.
Yeah, like a quote that you told to your brother Jimmy. 3 years ago, I was supposed to die. If I finish 20 miles and leave 6.2 on the course, it's not 6.2 miles of failure, but 20 miles of success behind me. And I think that's such a powerful mindset to have.
Yeah. Yeah. He asked me a specific question, and that's my answer to him. And I think that helped too, because then it took a little pressure off me of saying, okay, because I really believed that, and I didn't know whether it be 20 or 10 or 15, but I said, okay, so that's the way I have to look at this. When it when it when it when the bell rings and I'm done, I got to look back, see how many miles I covered, and that's my success. And luckily enough, I got to 26.2.
Yep. And you said, I've looked at this page talking about the website for your triathlon club. I've looked at this page for 3 years now, waiting for the day when I would post a finishing time. Here it is, 7:21:22. So you and your entire family, whether it's your brother Frank who went through a terrible accident, your dad being shot in the stomach,
Hmm.
you and your brother being firefighters at Ground Zero for 9/11, and then obviously you being hit by a bus and going through everything that you went through. Do you ever think to yourself, you know what, like the Longs, our family, we're just people who are built to go through tough stuff and get through tough stuff?
I, I guess so. I never really thought of it that way, but listen, um, there's parts of my stories that are unpublished. 6 years after my accident, I was now put running aside, and I was training to be a cyclist, a paracyclist, and I got hit by a Buick. So I was hit in Florida, riding a bike in Florida on training vacation, and me and one of my buddies, who started this whole thing with me before my accident, we both got hit by an old guy driving his car, and I broke my arm. That hurt, and I remember that because I didn't pass out. A couple of years after that, Superstorm Sandy hits the Rockaways where we live, and my house burnt down. So I lost everything I owned, all my bikes, everything, everything. We lost everything. So I don't know why that we've been through some tough stuff, but it definitely builds character for sure.
If you could go back and give your pre-accident self one piece of advice, what would that be?
If I went back to my pre-accident self during pre-accident, if I was a pre-accident athlete, I would say don't change a thing because I did have a really good balance in life. Uh, I was training, I was social, I was fit, I was healthy, I loved my job. So I would say don't change a thing. Now, if I went back a little further, I might say, hey, you need to slow down on some areas. But if I was I'll take it a little deeper. If I was as focused as I was in my 30s for Ironman and marathon, in my teens on basketball, if I was that focused, then I would have had a nice college basketball career. So I could chop that up into decades of my life.
And now, post accident, I mean, you are an incredibly inspirational person who's
Thank you.
given a lot back to the world, whether it's with your book and sharing your story and doing podcasts like this or with your I Will Foundation. So, I mean, you obviously have a clear purpose in life. But another question I have, pre accident, do you feel like you had a purpose in life or a clear vision for what you wanted to do before your accident?
No, no. The accident definitely gave me purpose for sure. Well, the recovery is what gave me purpose. If I didn't recover as well, if I didn't achieve that marathon, to come back Ironman, if I didn't write the book and tell the story, then I wouldn't have been able to tell people that no matter what your struggles are, um, it can be done. And I don't need any monetary rewards for that or anything to prove my point. I get emails on a daily from people who say, I almost gave up, but I read your story. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So the recovery and what I was able to accomplish gave me purpose in life for sure. And it's not easy.
My favorite line from your entire book that stands out is, at its heart, my story is really about an ordinary person who just happened to have extraordinary challenges come his way. And I dealt with those challenges just as any person might, unprepared and with a lot of uncertainty. And I think that's such a powerful message to say of how you're an ordinary person can have extraordinary things, where you don't have to be an extraordinary person to go through extraordinary challenges or times in your life. And like I told you at the start of this podcast, one of the main reasons why I started it is because I think there's something so powerful about somebody's personal story. People can give advice, people can share research on different things, but the story I feel like is where lives are really changed. in your eyes, why are stories, whether it's your own or just in general, why are stories so important for sharing in the world?
Well, especially stories that are closely related or on par with mine, it's because they're real life. You know, I think anyone can get up and be a motivational speaker, an inspirational speaker, and talk about things you're supposed to do and the faith you're supposed to have. But when I get up on stage and tell my story, I'm not going to make your business better. I'm not going to make more revenue. I'm not going to do all that stuff to you. I think what I would do is when I do tell my story from the heart and of a true real life experience of what's possible when I mean, there's not many people that could say that these weren't the ultimate odds. And these are the ultimate odds of that were against me. And I don't, this is something I say all the time when I speak. People who say they overcome adversity are full of shit. Okay. I didn't overcome anything. Because if I overcame it, that means it's over. It's gone. I'm better. I'm 100%. I'm never going to be 100%. And I had to learn to live with the fact that I was run over by a bus. And once I accepted it, once I stopped being angry, once I acknowledged the challenges I had ahead of me and took them on, that's when I started seeing progress. So I think the storytelling part of it, that it's a real life experience, it's not something that was just written down in a book or you're saying, hey, just follow my plan and you're going to be successful, is super important because you never know who's having challenges, mental, physical, family related, distance, cousin, whatever. Someone in that audience is having a struggle. And they're like, wow, this guy's been through every that, and he's up there telling a story on stage. I got this. When you're hearing someone's true life experience, real life experience, that's so much more impactful than just someone telling you, you know, I wake up at 4 a.m. and take a cold bath, and then I go out and run 10 miles, and I come home, take another cold bath. I'm like, okay, great.
I said in a previous episode, and your story and all that we've talked about, I feel like is testament to it. Is I'm a true believer that our greatest gift that we can share to the world is the insights and lessons that we learn from the toughest things that we go through in life. And like I said, you're a testament to that every single day. So, Matt, I really appreciate you for taking the time to coming on the Outworker.
Tim, thanks for having me, and I'm glad we got finally got together. Appreciate it.
Where can people find you and support you in all your work?
I'm on Instagram at 43 long underscore Matt, um, or LinkedIn Matthew Long. MattLongSpeaker.com is my website. So I take emails from there, mattlongspeaker@gmail.com. If anyone has an issue or wants to reach out, I try to answer them all.
Awesome. Thanks again, Matt.